I love what Shannon just read about the hope and the glory of God, and that we do rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. I never really understood the Holy Spirit. I remember Charles Stanley saying this, the Spirit-filled life is marked by purpose, power, and effectiveness. It is not something that you do, but something that you are, because of who is living and working inside of you. And I was like, oh, that's nice, but didn't really understand the Holy Spirit. But I want to share my testimony with you today about how the Holy Spirit empowered me during the darkest time of my life. Some of you might have heard that. I think Joyce did. I know Father Bill did. But I felt like, as I was praying about what I should give the sermon today, I felt like, I read this psalm, and it said, I have not hidden your deliverance within my heart. I have spoken of your faithfulness and your salvation. I have not concealed your steadfast love and your faithfulness from the great congregation. So you all are the great congregation that I am going to share the most powerful testimony that I have. I was so in awe of it that I did write it to Guidepost magazine, and they did publish, they put it on their website, but by the time they chopped it down, it didn't sound like my story, but anyway, in 1997, I was working as a social worker in a cancer center in Morristown, New Jersey. I was really enjoying that job. It seemed like the Lord really blessed me working with these dear souls. And a lot of doctors would say, oh, go talk to St. Lynne. I like that too. So, but one day as I was walking down the hall, the receptionist in the nurse's station said, your husband's on the phone. And he said, it's important. And I laughed and I said, oh, he always says that. He just wants me to get on the phone. So I picked up the phone, and as soon as I heard his voice, I knew something was wrong. And he said, our daughter Jennifer has been in an accident. She skied into a tree up in Sugarbush, Vermont. And she was an excellent skier. She was captain of her ski team. She went to college, St. Michael's College in Vermont, because she wanted to ski. He said, we got to drive up there. So that's a 6-hour ride to Burlington from where we were. So we jumped in the car, and immediately I called Lynne Curtis. She was my prayer partner. She was praying for us. But when I got there, nothing prepared me for what I saw. Jennifer's head, because she had hit the tree with her head and she was not wearing a helmet, her head was enormous, and she had tubes coming out of her head. Her head, I just didn't even recognize her. And I remember saying, no, this isn't Jennifer. And then I saw the tattoo. She had the Celtic knot on her ankle, which her father had a fit about because she didn't want her having tattoos. When she said, Daddy, it's the Trinity, you know. So she was a very, very special young woman. She had a very strong faith. And she was teaching Sunday school. At that time, she was a pharmaceutical sales rep, Hoffman LaRoche, and she was at Sugarbush covering a cardiology convention. Her boss was with her, and he said at lunchtime, let's go take a run. My son had dropped out of college, and he was living with Jen up in Vermont. And he heard the ski patrol say to the people, it's very, very icy. The day before, you know, Vermont weather, our weather, you know, it was 50 degrees and raining, and then the next day it was below 0 and freezing. So it was just boilerplate ice. and they said, don't open up the glades. Well, the glades are the area in the ski where there's a lot of trees. They said, don't open up the glades. And they did. Anyway, I think because there were so many doctors coming to go skiing. And so the last words that her boss heard her say was, Yahoo! He said she saw the tree, she tucked, and she hit some ice because they had made snow to cover the ice. She hit the ice and slammed into the tree. And there was a ski patrol guy there, a paramedic, who was taking care of someone else who had fallen on the ice and broken their collarbone. And they yelled over to him and they said, quick, come here, there's something even more serious. So this 65-year-old man intubated Jennifer on the side of the mountain. And it was such a windy day, they couldn't take the helicopter, so they drove her how many hours to the Burlington Hospital. So he saved her life. But it wasn't an easy life that he saved. I was at the time going to a charismatic church. When they heard about Jennifer's accident, they all met, and they said, about 40 of them, and they all met and prayed for Jen, and until one woman said, you know, I got a word, Jen's gonna live. And I think they were there till like 11 o'clock at night. It was a lovely thing that they did. And they all knew her. And so Denny and I were sitting in the ICU, the waiting room, and Denny, that's who's my husband, her father, said something, and we both started to laugh. I don't know what he said, but, and my son's looking, I have two sons. Jen was in the middle. I had an older son, Rob, and Brad was 7 years difference between my two sons. Jen was in the middle. And I don't know, Denny said something funny, I laughed, and my son was like aghast, and he's like, why are you laughing? Jennifer's in ICU. And we found out, we said, I don't know, just something lifted off of us. And then we found out days later that that was when the church was praying for us, all those people. So it was a very, very long haul. It wasn't at all what I expected. I figured God was going to heal her right away. I didn't understand what traumatic brain injury was. It was a whole right frontal lobe that was gone. And I just thought, you know, like in the movies, you know, they wake up and they say, oh, I have a headache, and then they say, what happened? And that wasn't the case with Jen. She was in a coma for months. They eventually flew her down to a traumatic brain unit in New Jersey, which could handle her kind of injury because it was so extensive. And so I quit my job, and I just would sit by her side, and I was praying for her. I used to anoint her with oil every day, so she had a little pimple on her forehead. And we just kind of, it was just day by day, just had to trust the Lord because there was nothing else I could do. So gradually she woke up. She didn't talk, she just stared. Gradually, you know, they worked with her for months, and they got her to walk again because she'd been in a coma for so long, she had calcification in her muscles and her legs, so they had to break all that to get her to walk again. And eventually, she got to the point where she could sit in a wheelchair, and she might be able to whisper one or two words. And at that point, her husband, who really loved her, I mean, they'd only been married 6 months, decided to bring her back to Burlington. I mean, he was like all of us. We just couldn't understand traumatic brain injury. I hadn't read any books on it. And that was before the Iraq War. Now we are much more familiar with what those dear men went through when they had a traumatic brain injury. So he brought her back to Burlington and put her in a nursing home. And we were still in New Jersey, of course. And we met with the doctors about 6 months after she was in the nursing home. We had a team meeting, and they were saying, put her in an institution. She's, what do they call it? She's non-compliant. They said, all she keeps saying is, I won't make potholders. I'm a pharmaceutical sales rep. I went to college. I don't make potholders. So they're like, non-compliant. And of course, I've been praying all the time, and I finally got up my courage, and I was able to ask her husband if he would be willing to send Jen back to this brain injury unit in New Jersey that just specified. And I think at that point, he said yes, he would. And so she lived with us, and people from church and would drive her, take her back and forth about an hour each way. And she started to be in a group of people who were young like her, people who were in motorcycle accidents, people, different brain injuries, young people. And I saw something, besides this bitter, angry person, I saw something clicking. So she did the 3-month rehab, and we went again to our team meeting, and they said, put her in an institution. It's been 2 years now. What you see is what you get. This is as good as she's going to get. And again, I just felt, now I know it was the Holy Spirit at the time, because I'm not really a particularly confident person. And I said, please, could you just, I think something's clicking in there. I don't know, I see something. She's living with me. Like he'd become like a little girl. She would set the table for dinner. And so I said, please, give her one more chance. Let her do another 3 months of this rehab. And they said, well, the only way we would do it is if her husband comes down and stays with her because she's acting like a little girl. She doesn't realize that she's married. So my husband called her husband. He agreed to take a family leave. His work gave him the job, so he could move down to New Jersey and spend the 3 months with Jen and have her not live with us, which was about an hour away from the rehab, but find a home near, so she could be acting like husband and wife. And of course, she got workman's comp, so the company paid for it all. So that was exciting. I'm like, yeah, we're getting some answers here. Then it got to be Christmas time, and they were going to start the new rehab in January, and I was up in Burlington packing her clothes, getting her ready to move down to New Jersey. But the big thing is they have to live together. They can't live with you. So, because she would call me Mommy Salami, things like that. Anyway, every once in a while, this little gentle thought would float in my head, and it would say, why don't you call the Episcopal Church in Metuchen? I don't even know where Metuchen is. And if you've been through anxiety, you know too, when you're really anxious, a lot of times you get these crazy thoughts. So I'm like, oh, it's just one of my racing thoughts. And I ignored it, and it would go on every once in a while. And then the day we were leaving Burlington and going down to New Jersey, that thought floated in my head again, and I thought, maybe it's God. So we were desperate. So I called Jennifer's social worker, and I said, where is Metuchen? She said, oh, about 10 minutes from here. And I said, is there an Episcopal church in Metuchen? And she said, I don't know, I have to go to a meeting right now. I'll call you back in an hour. She called me back. She said, St. Luke's Church. So I called St. Luke's from Burlington, got the answering machine, and just said, you don't know me, but I'm an Episcopalian, and we're looking for a place for my daughter and her husband to stay for a few months. Would anybody in the church maybe have something, that they could go to? Because my son-in-law had been looking all over, and nobody rents an apartment for 3 months. Plus, New Jersey real estate is astronomical. So, and their 2 young kids, been married 6 months, they didn't have the money. So we drive down 6 hours, get back to New Jersey, and I said to my husband, we got there about midnight, I said, did anybody call? And he said, yeah, Brad said someone left a message, some church left a message, but Brad erased it by accident. I'm like, oh. So the next morning I call, and Vince, that's Jennifer's husband, and had called me. He was looking around to see if they could find a place to move into after Christmas. And he said, hey, Mom, did the church ever call back? It's 11 o'clock. Jennifer saw McDonald's, and she has to eat. She says she has to eat. So I'm at McDonald's with her. And as he called, my phone call waiting went through. So wait a minute. Turned out this man said, why did you call us? I'm the senior warden of St. Luke's. Why did you call us? And I said, I didn't want to say God, Holy Spirit. I just said, well, I just got this thought that maybe you could help us out. And he said, well, you won't believe this, but our rector just retired. And we have an empty rectory here. And they are welcome to stay here in our house free of charge. And I said, they have a dog and a cat. He said, oh, I'll have to run that by the vestry. We called back later. He said, okay, they can bring them. The dear women in that church all got together and repainted the interior of the church. They furnished it with used furniture. When Jen and Vince got there, they had a crock pot for dinner. The refrigerator was full of food, and they started their 3 months together as a married couple. And she got better. She started to talk. She started to think about different things. And then she was able to go back to Vermont and live with Vince. Unfortunately, and we had been warned about this, Vince decided to divorce her, and she ended up living with us. And by then she could talk. She was doing very well. I became her social worker. She could talk, and she could explain why she was the way she was. She said, I felt like me, but everyone was treating me like I was retarded. And she said, sometimes I wish I had died on that mountaintop, because all her friends left her. She was different. With her brain injury, she was a different person. So she lived with us for 7 years. And this is the powerful part that I want to share with you, and why I'm able to give this testimony without tears, is her husband, one of the reasons he divorced her is because she got fat. He didn't like that. She had gained 80 pounds from 110 to 190 with her brain injury. She was just eating all the time. Anyway, when she started living with us, she got better. We ended up buying her a condo. She was coming to Christ Church every Sunday, sang in the choir, was at all Father Roy's Bible studies. And then finally, she came over to my house Friday in May and said she wanted to show me her new clothes because she lost this weight. And we had given her a car. She had taken driving lessons. She could drive 5 places. And one church, Price Chopper, my house, her therapist. So her last words were, Mom, I love you. She drove away. And she was very excited because my sister was coming up to take her out to dinner. And when my sister got there, she was having a grand mal seizure, which is one of the things that happens with people with brain injury. We found out later, when they did an autopsy, because the doctor said she was only 33, she lived for 7 years. The doctors said, we want to do an autopsy because for a young woman to die like that, we just don't understand. Months later, it came back. What she had done in those 7 years, at 25 years old, she had a lot of spare neurons. I don't, at 80, have many spare neurons. She had been able to reprogram her brain so that she could walk and talk and she even had a little part-time job. She was working it all out. But when she had the seizure, they said her brain was starting to show the signs of necrosis, which is getting old. And they said there was no neurons left for her brain to pull her out of the seizure. So raced to the ER, and they try and shut me out of that little cubicle, and I pushed myself, and I said, this is now 2004. And I said, I'm a hospital social worker, and I'm her mother, and I'll behave. So Jen was on a stretcher, a tiny little room. I had a chair facing her feet, and her head was up there. And I just started praying the same kind of prayers I prayed for all those months she was in a coma, just picturing Jesus at the head of her bed. Just a big, powerful person in a white robe and glowing. And as I was praying for her, all of a sudden, I had a vision, and Jennifer was standing next to him, and she had this huge smile on her face. And this peace came over me. And I said, I got it. It's time for her to go. So, Father Roy was there. A lot of people were in the waiting room, and I said, we got to let her go this time. We prayed her back 7 years ago, but, she had said she was ready to go. 2 weeks before she died, she was meeting with Father Roy because she was hurt by the people who treated her so badly because of her brain injury. And 2 weeks before she died, she said, Mom, we were doing the dishes. She said, my friends in Vermont don't want to see me anymore. And there's a long pause while she worked it all out. And then she said, that's because they miss the old Jen. And then she said, I can't be the old Jen. And then she said, it's okay, I forgive them. So it was a long journey, but God was with me every step of the way. And that's why I can run grief groups and counsel people, because God is real and the Holy Spirit is real. Thank you for listening.